No bells rang. No great event marked its beginning. The sun rose as it always had, slowly and without urgency, casting a pale, patient light over the land. In the early American countryside, mornings did not announce themselves. They simply appeared, like a habit formed so long ago that no one remembered its beginning. In a small settlement on the eastern edge of the colonies, long before factories, long before clocks ruled the hours, men and women stirred from sleep not because they wished to, but because they always had. Generations before them had risen at the same hour, under the same sky, guided not by ambition, but by necessity. The work awaited them, unchanged. Fields stretched outward in uneven lines, bordered by rough wooden fences and stone walls laid by hands now long buried. The soil had been turned and returned countless times, each season repeating the last, with minor variations that mattered only to those who depended on it for survival. Corn, wheat, barley, crops planted not out of preference, but tradition. Seeds saved from the previous harvest, pressed into the earth using the same motions fathers had taught sons and mothers had taught daughters. There was comfort in the sameness, though no one spoke of it. The tools were simple: hoes with worn handles shaped perfectly to the grip of human palms, plows pulled by animals whose lives mirrored those of their owners, steady, predictable, and unremarkable. Every scratch on the metal carried history, though it went unnoticed. No one paused to admire how little had changed. Work was not something to be questioned, it was something to be done. A man stepped outside his home, the wooden door creaking in a familiar way. He paused only long enough to draw in a breath of cool morning air. Somewhere nearby, another door opened, then another. The settlement came alive, quietly, as it always had, with the soft sounds of footsteps on dirt paths and the distant lowing of cattle. This was not the America of legends or speeches. This was the America of routine. Women moved with equal purpose, preparing meals that would sustain long hours of labor. The fire was lit the same way it had been the day before and the day before that. Hands measured flour by feel rather than number, guided by memory rather than recipe. Children watched, absorbing motions they would repeat for the rest of their lives. No one spoke of dreams. Dreams belonged to stories, not mornings like this. Time passed slowly, though no one counted it. Without clocks, the sun dictated progress. When it reached a certain height, it meant one thing. When it shifted westward, it meant another. The rhythm was so deeply ingrained that even silence seemed to understand it. Work bent backs and hardened hands, but it also shaped identity. To work was to belong. To repeat the same task year after year was not failure, it was proof of endurance. And so the day unfolded, nearly indistinguishable from those that came before it. No one knew they were living inside history. They did not know that centuries later, people would try to imagine what these days felt like. To them, it was simply life, ordinary, demanding, and endlessly familiar. As the sun climbed higher, the fields filled with motion, the same movements, the same effort, the same quiet understanding that tomorrow would look exactly the same. Work that never changed its shape had already done its most important job. It had made the ordinary permanent. In early American households, learning did not come from books or instruction spoken aloud. It came from watching, from repetition, from standing quietly at the edge of a room or field and absorbing the slow choreography of work that never seemed to change. A boy watched his father bend over the soil, the way the shoulders leaned forward, the careful spacing of each step, the steady rhythm of tool meeting earth. There was no hurry in it, yet no pause either. The movement existed in a narrow space between patience and necessity, refined by years of repetition. The boy did not ask why the work was done this way. He only knew that it was. Nearby, a girl sat beside her mother, observing hands that kneaded dough without measuring, folded cloth without pattern, and stirred pots without counting time. These were hands trained not by choice, but inheritance. The work passed from one generation to the next as naturally as language, though far less was spoken. In these homes, instruction was rarely formal. Correction came through silence more often than words. A raised eyebrow, a small adjustment of the wrist, a quiet redo of a task until it felt right. When it finally did, the hands remembered it forever. This is how skill endured. The tasks themselves changed little over time. Washing, mending, feeding, planting, harvesting, each carried its own rhythm, and together they formed the steady pulse of daily life. The work demanded attention, but not imagination. There was comfort in knowing exactly what the day required. Children grew into their labor slowly, almost without noticing. At first, they were given small tasks, collecting kindling, carrying water, holding tools not yet heavy enough to matter. Over time, these tasks expanded, quietly becoming responsibilities. By the time a child realized the work was permanent, their hands already knew what to do. No one spoke of choice. Work was not seen as a path towards something else. It was the thing itself, a constant presence, shaping posture, patience, and expectation. The idea that work might one day look different did not exist because there was no evidence that it ever had. Even when small changes arrived, a new tool, a slightly improved method, they were absorbed into the routine without ceremony. The hands adjusted, the work continued, the shape remained the same. As seasons passed, the movements repeated. Planting mirrored planting, harvest mirrored harvest. Winter chores echoed those of winters long gone. The body remembered even when the mind wandered. There were moments of quiet reflection, but they were brief and often unrecognized. A pause at the edge of a field, a glance toward the horizon, then the hands returned to their work. This continuity created a strange kind of peace. Not happiness exactly, not fulfillment as later generations would define it, but a sense of place, a feeling of being part of something older and larger than oneself. As evening came, tired hands rested. Muscles ached in familiar ways. The day closed as it always had, with little fanfare and no record. And when morning returned, the hands were ready again. They always were. Before clocks entered every room, time moved differently. In early American lives, the day was not divided by numbers or alarms. It unfolded instead through light, sound, and habit. Morning began not at a specific hour, but when the sky softened from black to blue. The first birds called out before anyone stirred, and their voices became the signal that rest had ended. The sun determined everything. Its angle in the sky told hands when to begin and when to slow. Shadows stretched and shrank, quietly marking progress more reliably than any ticking device ever could. A glance toward the window or doorway was enough to understand where the day stood. Work began without announcement. There was no sense of being late or early. Tasks waited patiently, unchanged from the day before. Fields did not rush. Animals did not demand speed. The work accepted whatever pace the body could offer as long as it continued. Meals arrived when hunger made itself known. Breakfast was simple and often quiet, eaten quickly before hands returned to motion. Midday meals were pauses rather than breaks, moments to sit, chew, and regain strength without losing the rhythm of the day. Evening meals marked closure, not celebration. Time was not something to chase, it was something to inhabit. Without clocks, days felt longer but lighter. There was no pressure to fill every moment. Waiting was not uncomfortable, it was expected. Weather could slow work, darkness could end it early, and neither was considered failure. These were simply parts of living. Children learned time by watching others. They noticed when adults slowed near dusk, when voices softened,
When tools were set aside, they learned that certain tasks belonged to certain moments, even if no one ever explained why. The day taught them through repetition. In winter, time stretched even further. Long evenings settled in early, filling homes with quiet activity. Hands worked by firelight, repeating familiar tasks while stories drifted gently through the room. There was no urgency to finish. Tomorrow would be the same. This absence of measured time shaped the mind. People did not think far ahead. Planning rarely extended beyond the season. The future was vague and distant, not something to be scheduled or controlled. Life was lived in manageable portions, one familiar day at a time. When clocks eventually appeared, they did not immediately change this rhythm. Many ignored them,